For 70 years, the people of England had a routine for this. You see the sails, you ring the bells, you grab the silver, the children, whatever you can carry, and you run inland. Then you wait, because the men in those ships always do the same three things. They land, they burn, and they leave. That was the deal, brutal, but survivable. The Vikings were a storm, terrifying, and then gone. In the autumn of the year 865, the ships come again, to the coast of East Anglia, and the people do exactly what they've always done. They brace for the storm. But this time, the storm doesn't pass. The men climb off the ships, and the first thing they ask for isn't gold. It's horses. Nobody in England understands what they're looking at yet. But within 10 years, three of the four kingdoms on this island will be gone. Their kings dead, their crowns handed to puppets, and the entire idea of England will be hanging by a thread in a swamp in the dead of winter. This is the story of how a few thousand men conquered a country of over 1 million. Not with numbers, with something far more dangerous than numbers. To understand what happens next, throw out the map in your head. In 865, there is no England. The word doesn't mean a country yet. What sits on this island is four kingdoms, and they hate each other. In the north, Northumbria, vast, old, and right now tearing itself apart in a civil war between two men who both claim to be king. In the middle, Mercia, the old bully of the island, past its best, but still strong. In the east, East Anglia, smaller, richer, flatter, the ones who just met the ships. And in the south, Wessex, the West Saxons. Remember them, they matter more than anyone in this story, though right now nobody would bet a penny on them. Four kings, four armies, four rivalries older than any of them can remember. On a normal year, the deadliest threat to a Mercian is a West Saxon. The deadliest threat to a Northumbrian is another Northumbrian. That's the country the ships have landed in, and the men on those ships are about to turn every single one of those cracks into a weapon. So how many of them were there? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Nobody actually knows. The men who wrote this down, monks, keeping a year-by-year record called the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, did not count. They just called it the Missal here, the Great Army. Great, not as in noble. Great as in big. Bigger than anything they'd seen come off the sea before. For a long time, historians guessed small, a few hundred fighting men. But over the last 20 years, archaeologists have started digging up the places this army actually camped, and we'll get to those, because one of them will genuinely stop you cold. What they've found does not look like a few hundred men. The honest answer sits somewhere in the low thousands, a few thousand spears, against a population of well over 1 million people. On paper, it's absurd. A rounding error of an army in a country 100 times its size. They win anyway. Here's how. The first move is the one nobody saw coming, and it's the simplest thing imaginable. They didn't leave. Every Viking force before this one ran on a clock. Raid in summer, when the seas are calm and the harvest is worth stealing. Sail home before winter, because winter on the open sea is death. That rhythm is the whole reason England survived 70 years of raids. You only had to endure the summer. Autumn always brought relief. The Great Army broke the clock. When the winter of 865 closed in, they didn't sail home. They dug in, right there in East Anglia, and settled down to wait for spring. And the East Anglians, desperate to make this somebody else's problem, bought peace. They handed over supplies, and they handed over horses. That word, horses, is one of the most important in this entire story. A Viking army on foot moves like any army, slow, predictable, easy to intercept. Put that same army on horseback, and it becomes something England has no answer for. They don't fight from the saddle, that's not the point. The point is speed. They ride to a target, get off, fight on foot, and are gone again before the Fyrd, the local levy, the part-time army of farmers, can even be pulled off its fields. The East Anglians thought they were buying their own safety. What they were actually doing was handing a mounted strike force the keys to the whole island. Move one, don't leave. Move 2. Never be where the enemy expects you. And now, with 3 kingdoms still to go, the army turns its horses north toward the one that's already busy destroying itself. Northumbria, in 866, is a gift. The kingdom has 2 kings, Osbert, who was thrown off the throne, and Ella, the man who took it, and they are at war with each other. 2 rival courts, 2 armies, both pointed inward, and nobody, absolutely nobody, watching the coast. In late 866, the great army rides north and takes the city of York. And they don't just take it, the sources give the date, and the date tells you everything. The 1st of November, All Saints' Day, one of the holiest mornings of the year, when the leaders of a Christian kingdom would be inside a church, not standing on the walls. It works flawlessly. Because the one thing that could have stopped it, a united Northumbria, doesn't exist. It takes the 2 warring kings months to understand they now have a bigger problem than each other. They finally do the obvious thing. Far too late. On the 21st of March, 867, Osbert and Ella drop their feud, combine their forces, and attack York together to take it back. It's a massacre. Some of them fight their way inside the walls, and inside the walls, it turns into a killing floor. Both kings die that day, the Northumbrian royal line, snuffed out in a single afternoon. And here the army shows you move 3. They don't try to rule Northumbria. They don't have the bodies to occupy a kingdom this size, and they know it. So instead, they find a local Englishman, a man named Egbert, and they put a crown on his head. A king who rules only as long as he obeys. Who pays them? Who keeps the kingdom quiet on their behalf? Why govern a country when you can just own its king? 2 kingdoms have now met the great army. Northumbria is a puppet, and the men who did it have not fought a single battle they didn't choose. Mercia is next, and Mercia, unlike Northumbria, sees them coming. In 867, the army rides into Mercia and seizes the town of Nottingham, and for the first time in this whole story, England does the thing that should have worked from the very beginning. It unites. Burgred, the king of Mercia, sends for help, and Wessex answers. The West Saxon king, Ethelred, and his younger brother, a man named Alfred, march north with an army. For one shining moment, 2 English kingdoms stand shoulder to shoulder, penning the invaders inside Nottingham. And then, nothing happens. The great army sits behind Nottingham's walls and simply refuses to come out. The English have no way to force them. The siege drags on. Winter creeps closer. And in the end, the Mercians do the thing everyone in this story keeps doing. They pay. Silver changes hands. The army agrees to leave Nottingham, and the Grand English Alliance quietly dissolves and goes home. Now notice the pattern, because the army has absolutely noticed it. Every single time England is made to choose between fighting and paying, it pays. Every time. And every payment teaches the army the exact same lesson. These people will always choose the safety in front of them over the war they're afraid of. That is not just a weakness. That's a weakness you can build an entire strategy on. They take the Mercian silver. They file Mercia away for later, because there's unfinished business back east. In 869, the Great Army returns to East Anglia, the kingdom that first gave them horses. Only this time, there's no deal on the table. This time, they've come to end it. The king of East Anglia is a man named Edmund, and in the winter of 869, he does something almost nobody in this story does. He fights, he loses, and he dies. What the earliest record actually says is short and cold. The army took winter quarters, and they killed King Edmund, and they conquered the land. That's it. That's the contemporary account. The version you may have heard Edmund lashed to a tree, shot so full of arrows he looked like a hedgehog, and then beheaded, that story is real. But it comes later. It was written down more than 100 years after his death as the tale of a saint by a monk who wanted to give Edmund a martyrdom worth remembering. Did it happen that way? We can't know. What we do know is harder and plainer. The king stood, the king fell, and East Anglia had no one left to lead it. 3 kingdoms, 3 winters apart, all of them conquered or collared, and the army has barely bled. Now there is only one left. In 870, the Great Army turns south and rides into Wessex, and Wessex does not fold. The year 871 is so violent the chronicle can barely keep pace with it. 9 battles in 12 months. The most famous comes early, at a place called Ashdown, where the West Saxons, led by the king's young brother Alfred, actually break a Viking army in open field and send it running. For one moment, it looks like someone has finally found the answer. They haven't, because here is the brutal arithmetic of this entire war. When the West Saxons win a battle, they kill some raiders, and the army pulls back to regroup. When the Great Army wins a battle, a kingdom ends. The two sides are not playing for the same stakes. Wessex has to win every time. The army only has to win once, and 871 grinds Wessex to the bone. Battle after battle bleeds it white. In April, the King Ethelred dies. Whether of wounds or sheer exhaustion, the record won't say. And his younger brother inherits a crown he may not survive the year wearing. Alfred, now king of a kingdom on the very edge of collapse, does the only thing left to do. He pays them to go away, and it works, for now. The army has taken the measure of Wessex, pocketed its silver, and it has somewhere else to be, because it's finally time to finish what it started in Mercia. This is the part where the earth itself gives evidence. For over 1,000 years, almost everything we knew about the Great Army came from monks scratching notes in the margins of chronicles, but in the last few decades, archaeologists have found the places this army actually lived between campaigns, and those camps rewrite what we thought this force even was. In the winter of 872 into 873, the army makes camp at a place called Torksey on the River Trent in Lincolnshire, and when archaeologists mapped what they'd left behind, they found something staggering. The site covers around 26 hectares. That is not a war camp. That's a small town, a temporary Scandinavian city that appeared on English soil for a single winter with metalworkers and traders and gaming pieces and hundreds of coins and weights. Because this army didn't only fight, it did business. It repaired its gear, melted down its plunder, gambled away the long, dark winter, and then vanished in spring. A settlement that size does not hold a few hundred men. Torksey is a big reason historians started revising the numbers upward. And then there's Repton. The very next winter, 873 into 874, the army moves to Repton in Derbyshire and camps right beside a church. And it is here, centuries later, that archaeologists uncover something that makes this entire war suddenly horribly physical. Beneath a low mound near that church, packed into a single broken-down building, lie the jumbled bones of at least 264 people. Around 80% of them are men, most between 18 and 45. Fighting age. For years, there was a puzzle hanging over them. Early tests seemed to date some of the bones to the wrong century, and doubt crept in about whether these were the army's dead at all. But newer analysis cleared it up. The old dates had been thrown off by something almost absurd: how much seafood these people ate in life, and once that was corrected, the answer came back clean. The bones fit. This is the Great Army, or the people who marched and died alongside it. Gathered into the ground in the exact winter, the chronicle places them there. You are, quite literally, looking at the army, not a legend, not a number in a manuscript, a charnel house full of the men who took 3 kingdoms. And while they wintered at Repton, they finished Mercia. King Burgred, the same man who once marched out to face them at Nottingham, simply gave up. He walked away from his throne and fled the country, all the way to Rome, to die in exile. And in his place, the army did what it always did. It found an obliging Englishman named Kilwulf and handed him the crown of Mercia to keep warm on their behalf. 3 down: Northumbria, East Anglia, Mercia, dead or wearing a collar in under 10 years. And then, in 875, the Great Army does the one thing that proves how completely it had won. It splits in 2. You only divide an army when you've stopped being afraid. One half, under a leader named Halfdan, rides back north, And in 876, the chronicle records something it has never had to write before. Halfdan's men shared out the land of Northumbria, shared it out. They stopped taking crowns and started taking farms. The raiders had become landlords. The conquest was quietly turning into a country, the beginnings of the Scandinavian England that history would come to call the Danelaw. The other half, under a leader named Guthrum, turns to the last name on the list, the one kingdom that paid them off instead of dying for it, Wessex. For 2 years, Guthrum probes it, testing its edges, feeling for the soft spot, until January of the year 878, when the army plays its oldest move one final time, the very move it opened with, all those years ago on the East Anglian coast. Surprise. In the dead of winter, in the quiet days just after Christmas, when no medieval army was ever supposed to be on the march, Guthrum strikes at Chippenham, where King Alfred and his entire court are wintering, warm, and completely unready. It's the East Anglian coast all over again. The storm that isn't supposed to come, in winter, coming in winter. Alfred barely escapes, not at the head of an army, as a fugitive, fleeing with a handful of men into the marshes of Somerset, to a scrap of dry ground called Athelney, hidden deep in the swamp. Sit with that image for a second. 13 years earlier, 4 kingdoms ruled this island. Now 3 of them are gone, and the last king of the last one is hiding in a bog, in the cold, with almost nothing left. A few thousand men against 1 million, and they did it without ever once fighting fair. By staying when they should have left. By moving faster than anyone could answer. By turning England's own hatreds into knives. By owning kings instead of killing countries, and by knowing every single time that these people would rather pay than fight. By every reasonable measure, England is finished, except the man in that swamp is about to do something in the spring that not one person in this entire story has managed. He's going to make the great army lose. But that how one cornered king in a marsh in the last kingdom left standing broke the army that broke England is a whole story of its own.